Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Environment and Green Investment Committee of Cambridgeshire County Council. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and tweet during the meeting, or other forms of social media are available. Can I ask that everyone present turns their mobile phone to silent or vibrate while the meeting is in place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. The closest fire escape is through the middle doors on my left. So would the Democratic Services Officer please report any apologies for absence under item 1?
We have apologies from Councillor Mills, Chair. We have Councillor Wilson substituting, and we also have apologies from Councillor Tierney.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Forrest and hands. Let's go round the table anti-clockwise with the shins. So, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know whether I need to declare the fact that I'm on the County Council Planning Committee for the item under Darwin Green. So I just thought I'd just check before we.
So just to confirm, that's not a County Council planning application, so you're fine.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, Councillor Gay, sorry.
Yeah, for the Darwin Green item, I'm a fellow and trustee of Christ College, which is part of the owners consortium for Darwin Green.
Any Councillor Smith, Planning Committee, same answer applies. Councillor Wilson, did I see a hand there?
Yes, so I'm a former employee and pensioner of the Environment Agency when we come to the item about the Waterbeach plant.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hathorn. Councillor Bradnam.
I'm local member for Waterbeach Division, so that refers to item 8, but I would come to the matter afresh.
Thank you very much indeed, members. So we move on then to item 2 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the Environment and Green Investment Committee held on the 7th of July 2022. We're being asked to approve these as an accurate record. If any committee member wishes to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only, can they please do so now? Any questions on accuracy? I'm not seeing any objections, so can I take that as unanimously carried?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to the updated action log, which is included in the published papers for this meeting. Are there any questions that anybody wishes to raise on any items in the action log? We have some ongoing items and 1 or 2 still to be updated, I think. Do people wish to ask questions about the action log? No. Cheryl, is there anything, or other officers, is there anything you need to update us on at the moment?
Yes, I'd really like to update you on the action, which was from January 2021 about lobbying bays on agricultural grant schemes. So what's been happening in the background is that there's a lot of tension or demand on land use between nature recovery, food sustainability, landscape recovery, water management, natural capital solutions, carbon mitigation, as well as renewable energy. And we're seeing some of those tensions in Cambridgeshire. And so there's a lot of work that's underway, including things like, or just starting local area energy planning, local nature recovery strategies will be starting. We've got local management plans, there's sustainable farming initiatives. Now, the results of those will inform how we best use our land use and how you might be able to get multiple benefits. So the discussion about whether we want to influence agricultural grant schemes for renewable energy, I think needs to be informed by those different aspects. So if you're okay, I'd like to close that down and say we've got a whole number of work streams that are going on, which are going to inform what land use can best provide for Cambridgeshire over a range of different issues, rather than just promoting renewable energy into agricultural grant schemes as a priority.
Members happy with that? Councillor Bradnam.
Could I just check, was that item 45?
That was action number 50. Thank you, Emma.
Okay. So that's from March, 3rd of March.
14th of
January
January
2021, first on the action list.
The first one.
Ah, okay. Oh, I see. Right, the very first one. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are we okay to move on that basis then and accept that? Yep. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Cheryl. Was there anything else that you needed to update on, or are we fine?
There was just one more. Sorry, I don't actually have the number in front of me, but it was about giving you updates on construction material prices, which came out in 20th of January 2022. So the world of material prices, demand in terms of a whole range of technology and materials for energy projects is changing weekly, daily, monthly. There is so much volatility in the market. So we have been providing updates when we come forward with projects where there are material changes, either increased costs on materials, or we've got long lead-in times that are going to create problems and we have to look at those in advance. So to give you a snapshot on construction material costs right now, it could change next week. So I was just going to say, we'll be keeping the Green Investment and Utility Advisory Group updated on these changes. Is that enough?
Thank you very much indeed, Cheryl. Okay with that? Yep. Thank you. Thank you, members. Right, so having agreed the action log then and not seeing any further questions, I will move us on to agenda item 3, which is petitions and public questions, and we have no petitions or public questions. So item 4 then is Darwin Green phases 2 and 3 development site Cambridge Road, Impington, and we have 3 officers with us today. So I'm going to ask Colin Fitzsimons, Development and Policy Manager, to present this report.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to you all. I have with me, but by my side here, Jez Tuttle, Transport Assistant Manager, who will help members with any issues they might have with transport matters, and then Tim Watkins here, who's the Head of Service within our team, who will also be fielding some answers if he is needed. This item then relates to a planning application which has been submitted by Barratt David Wilson Homes for 1,000 dwellings on the land to the north of Huntington Road in Cambridge. The site has been allocated in the South Cambs local plan under policy SS2 and is defined as a major development site. The application forms part of the Northwest Quadrant, which also includes 1,600 dwellings at Darwin Green Phase 1 and 3,000 dwellings at Eddington, both of which now have planning permission, as we're all aware, and are being implemented at different levels of rapidity. Collectively, all 3 developments were comprehensively planned in the early stages to ensure that they deliver infrastructure in a coordinated fashion. The applicant rather has held pre-application discussions with key stakeholders, including ourselves at the County Council, to shape the emerging planning application. The master plan has also been reviewed by the Cambridgeshire Quality Panel, which is there to encourage improvements to the design. The application was submitted by to the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning in May this year. The application is for up to 1,000 dwellings, a secondary school, a primary school, community facilities, retail uses, open space and landscaping. In addition to the outline application, there's also a full application which seeks to vary the location of the drainage ponds which have been permitted under the earlier application for Darwin Green 1. Appendix 1 of this report sets out the technical responses which have been made by officers in the council's role as statutory consultee. In addition, it also includes a summary of the points made by members at the briefing held in July this year to discuss the application. All these points will be used by the local planning authority in its consideration of the application and what mitigation may be needed. We don't know a date for the planning committee at South Cambs yet, but we think it might be not until later in the autumn, so perhaps November or December this year. As I said, the main issues in the consultation are appended in Appendix 1, but I'll just summarize some of the key issues just to help members with their consideration. In terms of archaeology, no objection has been raised. An archaeological planning condition has been requested to ensure that a written scheme of investigation for the heritage and built assets are recorded and investigated. In terms of digital infrastructure, BT Openreach will be providing the broadband to the sites. We've requested that further details and plans of the layout of the ducting is provided at the detail stage to ensure that we're comfortable with the provision. That presumably will be done through a planning condition to the planning permission. Education, a number of issues here. Firstly, we've established with the applicant that there will be a two-form of entry primary school delivered on the site. This will also include 2 early years classrooms, in addition to the mainstream 4 to 11-year-old classrooms. The developer will provide land to us at nil cost, and also a capital contribution to cover the cost of construction. Similarly, land and financial contribution will also be provided to the council to deliver the secondary school, which will be on the site. In addition to the early years settings at the primary school, the Section 106 will also enable childcare provision to be delivered throughout the site through the private and voluntary sector. And finally, a contribution will be sought towards SEND and children's centre services. The SEND provision is most likely to go into the primary school, and the contribution towards children's centres will go towards the children's centres services being provided on DG1. Floods and water. The local lead flood authority haven't raised an objection, although they have flagged up a number of issues which they want addressing. These principally relate to details and clarifications on how the drainage strategy is going to work and be implemented, and issues about the relocation of the drainage pond, which I referred to as the separate application, which is also being considered here. Library and Lifelong Learning Service, they've asked for contributions from this development to go towards the Darwin Green library, which is to be built shortly. Similarly, on strategic waste, contributions will be sought towards the enhanced facilities being planned for Milton. And then in terms of transport, there's a holding objection lodged by the TA team here, pending a full review of the transport assessment and their response to those issues which have been raised. And I'm sure Jez will give you more information about that at the point when you come to the questioning. So in summary, they're the key issues which we think members want to consider. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Colin. Now, we've received written comments from one of the 4 local members, Councillor Edna Murphy, who is unable to attend today's meeting. These comments were circulated to committee members in advance of the meeting. Could I please ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out Councillor Murphy's comments? Thank you very much, Dawn.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Murphy does flag up that she is a resident of Windsor Road, which is very close to the development, so she'd like to declare an interest there. And she also mentions the cycle path linked to Windsor Road in her submission. First part is on school provision. There are 3 parts to this. Currently, children in Darwin Green are having to travel long distances to get to school place, so it is important to bring forward the school builds as soon as possible. This will help with placemaking, but also reduce car travel and improve health. Can these plans be made clearer? Number 2, rather than have a separate space for a commercial nursery, could space within the primary school be provided intended for use by a commercial provider? This would reduce the chances of a commercial nursery ceasing business and then the site used for some other purpose. Additional nursery places are as important as school places. Number 3, there is a general problem with schools now located on either side of the north of Huntingdon Road, i.e. Girton and Eddington. The Eddington community consists of university staff and students, particularly postgraduates, and the Eddington School has been built for them, but there is a problem. They arrive throughout the year and not at the time when school places are allocated. Hence, Eddington is substantially filled with children of Girton residents, and the Girton School has places for Eddington residents. This means that there are large increases in children and parents crossing Huntingdon Road, but without adequate crossings to make it safe, leading to more parents opting to drive their children to school rather than let them walk or cycle. This must not be allowed to happen with Darwin Green schools, or at least the timing of school place allocation and which residents require these places to be factored in to traffic calming proper crossings in the north of Huntingdon Road. Second section covers water. There needs to be more clarity about issues relating to water, both flood risks and also longer term sufficiency. There needs to be consideration of the impact of this development, not in isolation, but in the context of the huge amount of developments that have happened in a relatively short time. Eddington, Darwin Green, infill developments, and of course the A14 scheme. There are real concerns in Girton about flooding risk, and a planned invert under the Oakington Bridge is scheduled to address this. Will the current development have an impact on flood risks? Also, given the overall levels of development, are water supplies going to be sufficient for the longer term? Next section, amenities more generally. Number 1, a resident of Darwin Green has complained that they still have no supermarket. When is this planned to be built? Number 2, NHS provision. What is happening about getting decent NHS facilities such as a GP surgery? There is currently an expectation that there will be one in the new Eddington development, which presumably Darwin Green residents will be linked to, but getting traction with the NHS there is proving difficult, so cannot be assumed to be in place. What are the plans for NHS and dental facilities for Darwin Green residents? Number 3, community facilities versus placemaking services. The physical provision of decent community facilities is critical and probably more value for money than staff in the medium and longer term. There are many groups in Cambridge and Girton too looking for venues to conduct community activities, and there are fewer available over time. Some more provision of physical spaces would be welcome. Unlike places like Northstowe, where more placemaking services are needed, Darwin Green is effectively infill, and there are already significant community activities underway, which could engage if space was provided. Last section's on transport, specifically cycling and walking. Number 1, path linking Thornton Road, Girton through Darwin Green to Windsor Road. We have heard that the information relating to the pedestrian network and other modes of travel remain fundamentally as presented at the consultation event and on the Darwin Green consultation website. However, we have been told some of the points of connection are subject to further discussion with the authority and will require an agreement from any third-party landowner who needs to agree to this. Alternative routes have been discussed with the authority should such agreement not be forthcoming, and are satisfied that the proposal's strategic approach to the movement of residents and visitors remains robust and comprehensive. The committee paper is also quite vague about any cycling opportunities. This seems very woolly and not strong enough. In fact, a massive opportunity missed if we are not able to secure this route at this time. Should be possible to agree this with the landowner prior to going ahead. We desperately need more cycling and walking connections between North Cambridge, Girton and beyond, such as to Oakington and Histon. It is a travel to work route, increasingly used and also much travelled by children going to Impington Village College, for example. It would be really difficult to secure this route at a later time. Please, can it be considered how to ensure the cycle route can become a reality in the scheme? Next point is country parks, lighting paths. It will be important to ensure the paths in the country park are lit, because Girton children in particular use this to cycle or walk to get to Impington Village College, or in due course the new secondary school. When lighting or cycle paths are initially installed, there needs to be an adjustment to the maintenance capital programme or developer contribution to ensure that it can be maintained properly. And lastly, 20-mile-an-hour provision. This would be important to secure from the outset.
Thank you very much, Dawn. So I'm going to ask officers to respond, please, to the points raised by Councillor Murphy in that set of questions and comments.
Thank you. Yes, I'll cover the first couple of points, then I'll hand over to Jez to deal with those 2 or 3 transport matters at the end. So yes, the issue about children travelling to get to school is a key issue when we're planning these sites. And the strategy right at the very start was for each site within the Northwest Quadrant to meet its own demand for school places. So Eddington had its own primary school, Darwin Green had a primary school, Darwin Green 2 has a primary school. And then there was going to be a secondary school on Darwin Green 2 to take the wider secondary catchment there. And the idea for that was, as the councillors pointed out, it's to reduce the need for travelling to get to school. Schools are on people's doorsteps, they can walk and cycle. In the case of secondary and primary provision, as education authority, we need to balance between the need for opening a school early to ensure that there are the placemaking benefits of community facilities on the site. But we have to balance that against the issue of whether or not there will be a viable number of children arising in the development to make the school viable to open. And that's a tricky thing to do. But generally speaking, certainly in terms of primary schools, we do like primary schools open early because they do have that community place building type of impact on developments. And we've seen that in other areas where they're sort of doubled up as community buildings and facilities as well as schools. The second point relates to the issue of early years and nursery provision. So the primary school itself will provide 2 early years classrooms. That is as a matter of course, we always seek early years provision within schools. And that will provide 52 full-time early years places for children of the development. This, however, will also be supplemented with just general childcare provision, which will be provided on sites to be identified within the site and secured through the 106. And that will be delivered through the PVI, the private and volunteer sector. Now, I think the council is concerned that what will happen if the PVI sector fails to deliver on the sites provided in the site. And can we counter that by having extra provision provided at the primary school? My initial response to that, I think, is that would be challenging, because we can only ask for what we've identified for the need at the primary school, and that's the early years provision, not wholesale childcare. But that's perhaps a point I can talk through with education colleagues and see whether there's some opportunity for that. It's not something we've ever succeeded in doing on other sites, but we'll certainly sort of rehearse that question again with them. And then there was the question about children moving between different schools across Huntingdon Road. Again, as I said, the strategy for the Northwest Quadrant was to ensure that Eddington and Darwin Green are largely self-sufficient in primary provision. And that's clearly the objective. However, we are very much constrained when it comes to the issue of parental choice, and parents can choose, providing that there are spaces and they comply with each school's admissions code, to take their children whichever school they choose. And then similarly, the specific point about Eddington and it being catering for graduate students, there's very little we can do in terms of the university's the university admitting graduate students at different times of the year to school admissions. Generally speaking, schools should keep an element of headroom, and it's usually about 5% for in-year transfers within schools or across schools. Now, whether or not that's sufficient to cover the issue at Eddington, where perhaps graduate students are en masse arriving in January rather than September, I don't know. But certainly our objective, and certainly in the long term, I think this will happen, is that when all the schools are built, there will be a natural kind of distribution of children going back to their local schools. But at the moment, there's a slight bit of flux, I guess, whilst the other schools are being developed. The item on water, I think, as we've perhaps mentioned in the report at the annex, the Local Lead Flood Authority have raised a number of queries regarding the maintenance of water courses which are being used within the site. So that's really who's going to maintain it and what the regime will be for those maintenance. And that sort of clarity is going to be needed to satisfy them that there's no risk of fluvial flooding within the site. And then secondly, I think the flood risk assessment has suggested that—
Sorry to interrupt. Could we just ask Colin?
Yes, I was going to make exactly the same point. Firstly, if you could move the microphone closer to you. It was okay when there wasn't the noises off, but with the noises off, it's impossible for members to hear. So if you, thank you, let's have another go.
Okay, is that better? Apologies if you've not heard anything else said previously in the meeting, but
We were okay until there was the sudden flurry of noise outside.
Okay.
But if you could speak up and move the microphone closer, that would be really helpful.
Right. So yes, there's the issue of maintenance of water courses on the sites, which they've asked for further details on. And then also the flood risk assessment has indicated that there is a risk of flooding in the event that there's a failure of some of the pumps which are being used on the site to dispose of surface water drainage. And again, they've gone back to the applicant to say, you've got to ensure that that flood risk is managed on site and that there's no risk of downstream flooding off the site as a consequence of that particular mechanical failure and any flooding which might arise from that. So those issues, I think, are being covered. I think also there's a suggestion that about water supply. Now, I think we're all aware now that in the south of the county, water resources are a key issue And it's certainly a matter which is causing a lot of, or generating a lot of thought in the development of the new local plan for Greater Cambridge. On the basis that these sites have been allocated in the previous local plan, I think the assumption here will be that water supply has been secured through Anglian Water, but longer term, if any more development comes through, that's the question which the local authorities are going to have to think about, and that would apply principally, I suppose, in this locality to the increased numbers of dwellings which they're considering at Eddington as part of the ongoing local plan. But I think for this development, water supply is not such an issue. There's two issues there which she's asked a question on. Firstly, that's the matter of the supermarket on Darwin Green, and then the issue of GP and dental services. There is a supermarket to be provided on Darwin Green 1. I will take this matter away and try and get an update from South Cambs as to what the developers programme are for delivering that particular facility. And similarly, I think I will need to sort of just get an update from South Cambs on where we are with GP services as well. And I'll perhaps just do a written update on those two matters, because they're matters of fact, I think, for South Cambs to help us on. And then the final one is paragraph 3.3, the issue of community facilities versus placemaking. This is a good point. We always seek to ensure that we get community facilities in early, because it's not just what the place looks like, which is important, it's how it functions. And we've just had an update last night from South Cambs on the matter, and they've confirmed now that there will be a temporary community building to be provided. That will be provided in proximity to the first phase of residential development, and will be delivered early on in the development to ensure that those community groups which need somewhere to meet and function will have that. That will then be followed in subsequent phases of development with the permanent building. So hopefully that will satisfy that particular point. I will now move the microphone over to Jez, and he will talk about transport. Sorry, are there any follow-up questions on those points first?
Before, well, there was one from me, and then I'll bring in Councillor Gay, Councillor Bradnam. Going back to 1.3 and school places issue, this was actually a sort of a two-parted question. There was the one about being able to flex when the places are allocated to ensure that children could go to the school on the side of the road where they live. But the other statement in there was that there was a need to look at, if that wasn't possible, how you enable safe crossings, and that's presumably going to be, is that going to be a transport issue for Jez? But I think that other statement needs to be addressed, and if it's addressed by Jez when he speaks to us, that's fine, but otherwise if you could pick that one up, I'll gather up the questions. So Councillor Gay was next.
Yeah, just a couple of clarifications about the Eddington development. It is not primarily for graduate students. There is a specific provision for Girton College graduate students within phase 1, but the majority of the development is designed to accommodate key workers within the university, particularly postdoctoral workers. Phase 2, which is still not agreed by the university, does potentially envisage a new college, but to date we have not been able to find anyone who is prepared to give us £350 million in order to endow it. And the second point is about the Eddington School. That is actually run by the university's Faculty of Education and is rated excellent by Ofsted, and therefore it is a magnet for all of the local parents to send their children there. I would suggest that the solution to this is to ensure that all the other primary schools that are going to be built are likewise excellent.
Thank you. Colin, could you please switch your microphone off? We need to remember that when we leave our microphones on, that hogs the video as well as the audio. So Councillor Bradnam was next and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I am also minded to reinforce Councillor Murphy's query about health provision, because we know that health provision is so vital and existing services are already stretched. So I really wanted clarification about where health provision is being planned for the site and when, but you've said you'll get details from that from the Greater Cambridge Planning Authority when you can, and get back to us in writing. So I'm looking forward to that, because there is, of course, that push me.
Councillor Bradnam, we're on clarifications and questions at the
Yes.
moment. The debate
Yeah.
will follow, and if there are points to be made in the debate, then let's resume to that. Councillor Smith was next.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I should also sort of mention in the debate, but you'll stop me if I'm obviously wrong. Basically, I also agree with a lot of the comments that Councillor Murphy was saying. Will she receive a written response? I just didn't know if that was what would happen.
I think it would be helpful if the responses to the questions were concatenated in some kind of way. Yes, can we ensure that happens and that that's circulated?
And
not
that
only
goes
to Councillor Murphy, but to members of this committee. Yeah, thank you.
Right, there's that. And there's also, I wanted to ask, which might be for later, but basically this, we're responding to the consultation. How wide are our comments going? Like, there will be an impact on other communities. Are we asking for any sort of mitigation measures for them? I just wanted to ask that, because you get
Yeah,
now like
so-
Northstowe, there's an impact on other villages, for example.
Right, I'll leave that to Colm to answer then. So Colm, there are a few questions for you in that, if you could pick
Thank
those
you.
up. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Okay, so shall Jez, do you want to address the issue of the potential for pedestrian crossings, or the need for pedestrian crossings on Huntington Road between Eddington and Darwin Green?
Sorry, good morning, and through the chair. There is currently a crossing at the signalised junction of the access to Darwin Green 1, albeit that it's actually on the west side of the road rather than the east side of the road. So there is a facility that's been built as part of Darwin Green 1. Now, we haven't looked at another facility as part of Darwin Green 2 and 3, but that's certainly something we could take away and have a look at.
Thanks, Jez. Yes, I note the points then made by Councillor Gay concerning the postdoctoral students. That's a subtlety perhaps I didn't pick up, and perhaps has put a slightly different complexion on it, I guess, in terms of the demographics, I guess, of that. So we'll bear that in mind when we think about school plan, place planning, etc. Similarly, yes, I mean the Eddington School did open. It actually opened very early on, probably more capacity than we perhaps anticipated, and as a result of that, it has perhaps diverted pupils from other catchments into that. I think over time, as children wash through the school process, the catchment areas become more defined and less blurred. So hopefully that will resolve the more fundamental problem, I think, of which Councillor Murphy raised. Noting Councillor Bradham's point, yes, we will absolutely try and find an answer as to where and when those facilities. And I note it's not just GPs, it's dental as well, isn't it? Quite happy to twist a written response back to Councillor Murphy. I think that's absolutely reasonable. In terms of the wider impacts, yeah, that's a good one. I suppose it depends which elements or which impacts of the development we're looking at. Clearly, when we're looking at education provision, we can only look at the impact which will be generated by the development and ask for mitigation to meet that need. What we can't do is say, oh, there's no places for secondary school over in Arbury, therefore can you provide places for them? Because that's not directly related to the development. That's something which the county council would hypothetically have to fix on its own independently of this. I think it's probably slightly different with flood risk, for example, because we do have to look beyond the site and think about the impact of flooding downstream, because the flooding starts there and could end up miles away. So that's something which we do think about, and that might mean mitigation off site. And likewise with transport, we'll be looking for public transport interventions which might help enhance not just services serving this, but sort of wider services as well. Is that helpful, or do you want to follow up?
Thank you. It's basically, I mean, you talk about the education. Yeah, that's fine. It's more sort of the impact of this development could have on other villages and areas. That's where I'm sort of going from. How do we look at that? And like I say, sometimes, so like in other developments, it's caused a problem in surrounding villages, but they haven't been thought about. And I just want everybody to be thought about. It's all right, it's doing a response, but all right, well, we've got a problem. There needs to be mitigation thought about. And also green routes, basically, they go beyond the development as well. It's just tying everything together, really. That's all I'm just trying to do. Thank you for letting me come back.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now go to Jez for the transport response to Councillor Murphy's questions.
Good morning again. So there seems to be sort of three issues that I've picked up. The first one is connectivity. Now, Darwin Green 1 does have an obligation to provide a link through to Windsor Road. That will be done as part of Darwin Green 1. Darwin Green 2 and 3 will be providing a link to the northwest through to Thornton Close. That is the only link at the moment that we can guarantee, because the land is within the gift of the developer and the county council to actually provide that link. Links to Thornton Close and Wellbrook Way, unfortunately, the applicant doesn't own the land or control the land, nor does the county council. So we cannot oblige the developer to use third-party land to provide a link. Unfortunately, that's just under planning. That's not possible. We are looking at alternative routes to get people to where they need to be, and we're in discussions with developers at the moment about that. They are working up a scheme which will be submitted for our safety audit team to have a look at, and I'll be involved in that process. The second one was open space. So we had the question of lighting. Lighting is usually only used in sort of urban areas on cycleways that go through urban streets. The problem with open spaces is it then conflicts with biodiversity issues. So therefore, we don't really want to light absolutely everything and have everything lit up like a sort of Christmas tree because of the biodiversity aspects. What we can do is we can put things like solar studs in there, which are the sort of, they're in the ground. But we would want the developer or the management company of the open space to actually provide a maintenance sum to maintain those, because they're not adopted highways. So someone would need to maintain them. The highway authority wouldn't maintain them. And the third one is 20-mile-an-hour streets. All new streets and new developments, we work with developers to design the streets so that speeds are restricted to below 20 miles an hour by use of horizontal deflection rather than speed humps. So short stretches of road that are straight, followed by bends, so that people are less inclined to go fast. This is coupled with the urban form around it and the type of landscaping that's used in these streets. I think that should cover everything.
Thank you very much, Jez. So with those responses, then I would like to go on to ask councillors Hathorn and Ray as the other local members. Councillor Cox-Condren has said that she does not wish to make any representations on this today. I know she's been in touch with officers outside this this process. Councillor Hathorn, as a local member, would you like to say anything in that role?
Yes, I've got a few points. One is there's a lot here written by Think Communities, which I think is very good. But one thing that Think Communities are using in Orchard Park is the ability of the community centre to use the revenue generated from the sports pitches to then sort of stimulate other community activities. I think there's a real tension here, and I don't have a solution. But I think it's sort of important to be aware of it and important to be flexible and develop a good solution that works. We've got sports pitches located on schools with a request that the community get to use them for free, although there is a cost in opening up your sports pitches to the community. So I think there's a balance there. We've got community centres, which I'm not sure what revenue generation they have, capacity they have beyond their own space. We've got it's part of the development, you know, it's going to, I think if you live in Darwin Green, you're probably not going to think I live in Darwin Green phase 2. You just think I live in Darwin Green. And you've got a tension between part of the area being in the city, which operates in a very different way from the district council, which works would work here possibly in terms of a community council, but that creates a real tension. You've got a country park that's located in South Cambs when most of the residents aren't living in South Cambs. Who's going to pay for that? What's the model to pay for that? And I just feel that communities need to have some kind of ability to generate their own revenue, and that's got to make sense for all the players in the community for that to work, and for the community to be able to use that for the good means, to be able to use that to make choices like who they want to support. And although I don't have a solution, I just think it's important that, you know, that is acknowledged and it's worked through, and we, you know, that's an eye is kept on that and discussions are kept open. I spoke to Councillor Slatter, who is in Trumpeton Meadows and has a similar tension, and she said that some decisions made really early on have been bad, have stopped sensible decisions being made. So sort of an awareness of the problem being flagged, but that flexibility to be able to develop solutions that work for all the players. So that's kind of my big thing. I also, the country park, we don't seem to refer to it at all. There is a requirement on biodiversity net gain, which presumably this would be part of. It's in an air quality management area, although that is disputed within this. And I like the side that the county council is pushing for this. I think using planting within the country park to protect the communities from the A14 is really important. It would be good, I think. So I spoke to Quinton Carroll and Phil Clark, and they didn't know anything about it. So it'd be good if SPAG, I can't tell you what that means, something green maybe, if they worked, you know, were involved in the process of developing the country park to make sure it works, because this is what they're doing across the county. There's stuff about cables for broadband. I'm slightly concerned that there's no reference to 5G and mobile masts. Having dealt with a protest against an application in Impington, the last thing I would like to see is residents moving into Darwin Green and being confronted with a massive, great big mobile phone mast being proposed right in front of their house, when, you know, these decisions could be made now and space is allocated now. So I think that's quite important. And then I'm not sure what these I don't know enough, I'm afraid, about the houses to know about the design, but I am aware that having gone through Eddington on a hot day, some of the streets were very austere and there wasn't a great deal of biodiversity, and it felt very, very hot. So just sort of talking about biodiversity net gain in the streetscapes as well as in the designated large areas, I think is worthwhile at least mentioning.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hathorn. Councillor Ray, did you want to say something as a local member?
Yes, I'm the local representative for Castle, which includes Darwin Green. And I would like to endorse very much what Edna Murphy has said, Councillor Murphy has said, in her submission. I'd like to pick up on 3 points. Firstly, the Thornton Road link and the importance of cycling connectivity to the development as an essential part of more active transport. Now is the time to put pressure on the developer to secure access to that land. If we backpedal at this point, they will just not try hard enough, and trying hard enough really relates to how much money they're prepared to pay to the third-party owner to get access to that land. So I think now is the time to be really insistent that that is necessary for the proper development of Darwin Green. Secondly, on school places, this is a problem throughout, I guess, in terms of phasing and having enough provision for children coming in out of the normal cycle for admission. We're ending up with illogical assignment of children to schools because of the timing that they come into the system and not being able to get places at their local school. This is something that really needs to be thought about, particularly in the nature of a large number of people coming in, as Councillor Gay has said, in October, which is very much out of cycle with the allocation of places. And the third thing is community provision and making sure that there is initially sufficient premises. So this is sort of buildings that can be used for communities, and also holding the developers' feet to the fire to actually deliver on that. There's been a lot of prevarication and backpedaling by Barratt's on Darwin Green 1 in the amount of community provision they're prepared to make. And again, this is something to make sure it's there from the beginning, and it's insisted that it is delivered as promised and on time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ray. Officers, did you want to give a quick response to any issues raised in those 2 submissions?
Yes, I think they're all points which we've heard and will take note of and take back to our colleagues at Greater Cambridge. Councillor Hotham's issue about the funding and management models for delivering community facilities is a good one. Clearly, South Cambs and the city do have perhaps differences in how they think on those particular issues, and there are inevitable clashes when they come together physically on a site like this. So yeah, we have close working relationships through Think Communities with the community team at both councils. So we'll start that thought process going now, and hopefully we'll find some solutions which will help you. The country park. Again, biodiversity net gain, air quality, the relationship with the A14 and SPAG. I'll go and revise what SPAG is and respond to that accordingly. The country park will be subject to its own planning application, a reserve matters application at the appropriate time, and we'll feed those particular issues into that so that South Cambs know, if they're not already, that these are issues which need to be considered. I mean, you talk about the A14. There is the need for the noise mitigation element along there, and we understand principally that will be delivered through landscaping. When I say landscaping, land forming with planting on that. Although we think there may be, and I'm speculating a little bit here, that there may be some element of fencing, but certainly not to the extent that we saw at Orchard Park. It will be more considered than that. So. The point on broadband, yes, I think any underground or overground infrastructure will be subject to the planning conditions. So again, we'll make that point to South Cambs to ensure that there is a robust and useful planning condition in there when they issue the consent. The point about I suppose the biodiversity and the microclimate within the development is a very good one. This is something which is always captured at the quality panel, and will most certainly be captured again when we start looking at the housing parcels and the detailed housing designs and the urban design between the houses. And what we're always trying to achieve in that is to ensure that there is mitigation for microclimatic impacts like shading, like rills and water gardens, which not only provide a microclimatic advantage, that then feeds into biodiversity and also flood risk, because it retains water where it falls in the development rather than downstream. So all excellent points. I won't say we're entirely on top of them. It's very difficult to do it in the design phase, but yeah, certainly ourselves and South Cambs are fully aware of those particular issues. Councillor Ray, on the Thornton Road link, I think that's a clear instruction, Jez, that we need to go back and bang the table a bit more. I think that's fair enough. And again, noting the point about the conflicts we have and the challenge we have over school admissions at different times of the year. And again, I'll have a separate conversation with our colleagues in education, place planning, to ensure that that's part of their thinking as well when they're looking at delivering places. And then it was the final point about the ensuring that the community facilities are delivered on time and in accordance with what's promised in the 106 of the planning permission. Again, that links to the other point, and I'll join up with the communities team at South Cambs to make that point as well.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Colm. Are there any questions outstanding for our officers? I'm seeing Councillor Bradnam, was yours a question? Can you tell me if it was a question or a comment?
It's actually a declaration of interest.
Oh, right,
It
okay.
suddenly occurred to me that I have considered the plans for Darwin Green and the as a member and previous chair of the Joint Development Control Committee, which looks at planning applications across the boundary between South Cambs and the city. So I think we've had briefings there and also early considerations of this, but I'm coming to this matter, in the light of the general, general interests, not with any particular axe to grind or anything.
I'll just take a moment's advice on that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. But I think when you're declaring that, it's probably also worth saying that you'll be looking at the application at Planning Committee at Greater Cambridge as well. So if you just broaden that to say that, you don't need to do that. We can just note that down. Just for the minutes as well, SPAG is Strategic Parks and Green Spaces. So that's what that acronym stands for. The representations here will be the County Council as a statutory consultee. So this is all our statutory functions. While SPAG isn't a statutory function, they are having a lot of input directly into Greater Cambridge, and particularly on the emerging local plan. So whilst colleagues such as Phil Clark, Deborah Ahmad would have been consulted on the ecology matters, and Quinton in particular would have been consulted on the archaeology. SPAG would not be a statutory function, so it's worth pointing that out. But I know that there is close correspondence between planners at that sort of city South Cambs junction, that they'll make sure that the planning application takes that into account. So just to explain that when we're looking at this, we're only looking at it at the County Council, but a lot of these comments are kind of crossing that boundary, but we can make sure that's part of the member minutes to make sure that it's all considered by the case officer before it's taken ahead of their planning committee. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam again. Is it a question now or further?
No, it's just a
further-
clarification that Ms Fitch pointed out that they would clarify in the minutes about my declaration, but the point is I do not sit on South Cambs Planning Committee. I'm only a substitute on that, whereas I am a member of the Joint Development Control Committee. And so there's this difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Questions then, I saw Councillor Coots and Councillor Wilson. Councillor Coots first.
Very straightforward question. I was quite relieved to hear that SPAG didn't stand for spelling, punctuation and grammar, which it had in my previous existence. If the new development is very sensibly being designed for 20 mile an hour, can we be assured that it will have a 20 mile an hour speed limit on it? Is there any reason for not doing that?
Through the chair, the introduction of a 20 mile an hour speed limit would fall outside the planning process. So that's something the county council will have to look at. As its wider review of 20 mile an hour zones.
Is there any possibility of making some kind of joined up attempt to work that into the whole process between officers?
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions about the paper. Is now a good time to raise those? Okay. So the first one, we're not asking for any contribution towards post-16 education because there's spare capacity elsewhere. That seems an odd thing to do when we will be taking up capacity elsewhere, which inevitably is going to cost us money. And the second issue, I'm pleased that there are references to climate impacts being picked up in reserved matters applications, but I would still have preferred to see something in the overall planning, the outline planning application to demonstrate the importance that the county council attaches to net zero and dealing with climate impacts, particularly as we're talking about, we've already talked about flooding, water supply, transport impacts, and active travel, but there must be other things as well that we should be looking at. Thank you.
Officers, any response on that?
Yes, on the issue of post-16 in particular, yes, whilst inevitably this will generate demand for post-16 places because children will want to go to a post-16 facility, because of the availability of the surplus of capacity in the Cambridge area in general, not just at our own schools, but also in the sixth form colleges and other providers. The Education Service didn't deem it necessary to seek mitigation in this particular instance. Now that obviously differs, for example, from the Waterbeach applications, which we're looking at, where because of its relative isolation, it was deemed that a post-16 facility on the site would be a worthwhile exercise to meet that need, rather than having an element of post-16 children travelling into Cambridge or to Ely. We are seeking provision on that site. But it was deemed not necessary in this instance because of the capacity and the number of facilities and places we have already in Cambridge.
Okay, thank you very much. Microphone column, if you'd be so kind. Thank you. So having dealt with those questions, then the recommendations are that the committee is asked to endorse the consultation response to, oh, sorry, Councillor Wilson, you wanted to come back with a question?
Well, the first question was answered, although I don't agree with the answer. And the second question was about climate change, which hasn't yet been addressed.
Thought that was a kind of a view rather than a question, but Colin.
Yes, climate change. I think probably I'm struggling to give you an answer because there will be presumably when the house types and the reserve matters come in, a requirement for those houses to meet the current requirements for energy consumption, insulation, renewable energy. But we don't know when those applications are come in, but they will be subject to the building regs and any other policies and requirements should come in to mitigate their carbon impact.
Can I suggest firstly that we have Cheryl French here with us, who is our climate change supremo. If Cheryl could give us any advice that she can at the moment, but that rather than have a debate now, bearing in mind that we are asking for delegation and the ability to make minor changes, that we take that thought away. Cheryl, is there anything you'd like to say before we do that?
Yeah, just a couple of things is Sarah Wilkinson in our team has just taken on a wider remit of carbon and energy, which is including to look at planning applications in more detail on carbon calculations for a whole range of issues that come forward. And Emily Bolton has just taken on a new role as Climate Crisis Strategy Manager. So both of their roles are now to also focus into planning applications. So I'm hoping that's one thing. The second thing is there is a strong policy coming through from the Greater Cambridge Planning Service on homes in Darwin Green about how to accommodate after phase 1, how to accommodate retrofits in existing buildings which are going to take gas initially, but will need to have enough space to be retrofitted in the future for air source heat pumps. So there's a good policy coming through on that. Graham, was there something else in terms of looking at climate change in terms of how it was managing heat island effect, how it was looking at nature recovery within that process? Is that the type of question or answer you were looking for?
Exactly. All those things and more. I would have expected every house, for example, to have solar panels, and for us to be specifying now that that is our expectation.
Yeah,
and it could be that, well, that's a responsibility of South Cambs or the city or whoever to deal with, or Greater Cambridge Partnership. But in view of the importance of climate change to this county, I would have expected us to be doing something about it and saying things about it.
Yeah, and that's where actually I have to say the Greater Cambridge Planning Service are doing very well on bringing policy forward for trying to move the standards, because national standard on building regs currently is what the first phase is going through, I understand, Colin. And so it's up to 2025, there is gas infrastructure to go, gas boilers are going in, but post that, it's how you're trying to ensure that you've got a better solution. I know that's not ideal, Councillor Wilson, but hopefully the policies coming forward, which are strong from Greater Cambridge Planning Service, will help. Is that what your view as well, Colin?
Yes, I think that's the point I probably clumsily made, was the issue about moving from one building regulation regime to the other one. And as Gerald said, Darwin Green 1 is registered under the old one. I suspect this one, when the planning permission comes in, won't be able to do that. They'll have to go to the new one, which is no gas boilers and probably enhanced insulation and everything which goes with it. I don't think the regs will deal with renewable energy. That probably has to be a local thing, which comes out of policy.
They'll deal with carbon, so it's carbon and energy reductions and energy efficiency.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Bradnam indicating to come in on this point, I assume, and Councillor Corney also.
Thank you, Chair. I would endorse Councillor Wilson's request for this at least to be mentioned at this outline stage, because we know that when we get to reserved matters, we are unable and have no powers to request anything if it hasn't been mentioned at outline. So absolutely, I would endorse Councillor Wilson's request that it should at least be referred to as something that we want to have aspirations about, and we want developers to be thinking about and complying with, so that then when reserved matters come through, we've got something to hold it to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bradnam. Councillor Corney.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's not really a question, but just if it helps Councillor Wilson settle his mind, I guess. building control at the moment, building regs that are coming in, talking to some meetings with my own architect. I think most houses are probably going to have solar panels fitted to actually meet the standard coming forwards, because the bar's being set so high. So whilst I still agree, it doesn't hurt to put it into to writing that it's something that's coming through.
Thank you very much indeed on that. With that, I'd like very much, because we are running quite late, to move to at least move the recommendations so that we can have the debate. So the recommendations are that we endorse the consultation response to the Darwin Green 2 and 3 planning application as set out in Appendix 1, and delegate to the Executive Director, Place and Sustainability, in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the committee, the authority to make minor changes to the response. So I'd like to move that from the Chair. Is that seconded? Thank you. So is there any debate now that needs to be had on this matter? I'm not seeing anybody wishing to debate that. So can I put that to the vote, please? Can I see all those in favour? Any against? No, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, members, for that. Thank you very much, Colm, Jez and Tim. So can I move us on to the next item, please, which is item 5, which is key performance indicators for this committee. And I'd like to ask Rachel Hallam, who is the research manager, to come forward and to present her report to us. Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. Would you like to go ahead and introduce your paper very briefly, assuming that members have read it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I wanted to start with a quick recap for committee members, if I can, just quickly to say the background to the paper I present today. Earlier in this year, in February, the Council adopted a new strategic framework and performance management framework. Under this new performance management framework, the role of policy and service committees in relation to performance management is set out. One of those roles is to select and approve additions to and removals of key performance indicators for the committee performance reporting. Following on from a January paper to this committee, outlining the process for performance management moving forward, a recommendation was made to review the previous list of indicators, and a workshop was subsequently held in June with members of the committee to discuss. This paper firstly summarises a proposal of the changes to that previous list of indicators for committee to discuss and agree. If committee can review and confirm an initial agreed list of key performance indicators, officers will take these away for development, and these will be presented moving forward in quarterly performance reports. Appendix 1 provides a draft set of this performance data, and I'd just like to highlight this is for information purposes only today. This is to allow members to see how this reporting might look moving forward. I would like to, at this point, just alert committee to a minor typing error on pages 56 and 69 of the pack, where indicator 150 should read the overall Cambridgeshire recycling, reuse, composting and recovery rate 12-month rolling total, to match the title of indicator 150 on page 70. The paper also contains a proposal for 5 of the proposed committee indicators to become strategic key performance indicators, which simply means they will also be presented to Strategy and Resources Committee for approval and to eventually form part of the wider corporate monitoring moving forward. Therefore, the committee are also asked to discuss and agree the proposed strategic key performance indicators to be recommended for consideration to Strategy and Resources Committee.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. So, are there any questions from members for Rachel on her report? No, okay, thank you. So the recommendations are to review and agree the proposed additions to and removals from the Environment and Green Investment Committee Key Performance Indicators set, and to agree proposed strategic key performance indicators for Strategy and Resources Committee. I'll propose that from the chair. That's seconded by Councillor Gay. Thank you. Is there any debate to be had on these? No, not seeing any. So obviously a very comprehensive and thorough and unchallengeable report. Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. Can I take a vote on that, please? Can I see all those in favour? And I think that is unanimous. I don't see anybody against or abstaining. So thank you very much indeed, Rachel, for your report.
Thank you.
So item 6 then is the committee agenda plan and appointments to outside bodies and internal advisory groups and panels. So I'm going to ask the Democratic Services Officer to update us on any changes to the published agenda or appointments.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few small changes to the agenda plan. The North Stowe report's moving from the October to the December meeting, and another addition for the December meeting is the annual carbon footprint report. In terms of appointments, we've been approached by Conservatives of the River Cam, who have asked if we could reappoint Councillor Bradnam or whoever to them to fall in with their sort of governance cycle, because that appointment with them runs out in December. So there's that one, and there's also a new appointment, which is the South Cambridgeshire District Council's North Stowe Delivery Group. The local member, Councillor Firouz Thompson, has been approached as the local member to join that group. So if the committee are in agreement with those two appointments, so one's just rolling over Conservatives of the River Cam, and the North Stowe Delivery Group's a new group.
Thank you very much indeed, Dawn. That's very helpful. Any issues with any of that from members? No, are we happy to note the agenda plan and the appointments? Yes, thank you very much indeed. So in order to discuss the detail of item 7, we need to move the meeting into private session, excluding the press and public. So are you happy, members, for me to formally move, which I will do if you are in agreement, that we move into private session? Yeah, okay, thank you. So the recommendation is to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the agenda contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed, and its information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. So that's the recommendation. Yeah, agreed to that. So as this is the final public item on the agenda, I'd like to express my thanks to those members of the public and press who have taken the time to watch the meeting today via the council's website. The broadcast will now end, and the committee is due to next meet on the 13th of October. This public meeting is now closed. Thank you.